go for it.
Hello, listeners, and thanks for tuning in again or for the first time. Recently, a friend was musing about the dichotomy between what society says they value and what they follow, submitting Genghis Khan as an example of a style seemingly followed and multiple religious leaders as what is said to be valued. And then separately, I was having a chat with today's guest, deciding on the direction to take our talk, and Craig said, one of the great laughs to be gained by so-called leadership seminars is the fact that Churchill and Genghis Khan didn't need them. Perhaps we might talk about that during the podcast. So accepting this as the sign that it very well might be, I said yes. And I'm excited to be talking about leadership, values, and today's world of work with Craig Newnes, editor of the Journal of Critical Psychology, Counselling and Psychotherapy, and a commissioning editor and author for Peace CCS Books' Critical Psychology series. Prior to his retirement, Craig was a consultant critical psychologist and director of psychological therapies for Shropshire County, a haven of peace and tranquility 94 kilometers outside Liverpool, England. He has a lifetime commitment to the NHS and is an outspoken critic about the practice of psychiatry and psychology. He believes that most of the misery for which people seek help is only amenable to alleviation through changes in their material lives. Hi, Craig.
Hi.
Welcome. And thanks for taking some time out of your day today. I saved a bit of your background for you to share with us. So why don't you augment that a little bit? Because I just talked about your work background, but you've got a lot of other stuff up your sleeve. Tell us more.
Well, yeah, I shall. But before I do that, I think you mentioned me being a consultant critical psychologist.
Before retiring.
Yes. I'm not sure if you mentioned that I was actually in charge of the largest department of psychological therapies in Britain.
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't think I said it that way, and I'm so glad that you did. I think I said that you were a psychologist as well as the director of psychological therapies for Shropshire County.
Okay. Yeah, it's Shropshire's mental health, NHS Mental Health Trust, which is kind of the county. But I think crucially, the department had 80-something people in it, including me, and they spanned the whole range of counselling, psychotherapy, psychiatry, clinical psychology, community psychology, etc. So it was a very unusual department in terms of Britain, because in terms of Britain, most departments pretty much focus on one-to-one clinical work. And we didn't have a lot of faith that would help many people. So
it would take a long time.
Well, that's one. You might suggest that. The problem is that if these things take a long time, so many other things are happening in the person's life that you can't possibly put it down to therapy. So a good example would be, I was in psychoanalysis. That's why I'm so completely rounded and healthy. I was in psychoanalysis on and off for 6 years. Now, in those 6 years, I moved countries, I moved jobs twice. I split up with the love of my life. I then got back with the love of my life. Lots and lots of change.
Aren't those like the top 5 of like drastic things to do in your life and lose your mind over?
Well, maybe, but crucially, let's assume I came out of all of that a more rounded, better person. I couldn't possibly say how much of that was due to my analysis, because so much else was going on.
Sure.
And so that's one of the problems. If a therapy lasts a long time, you have much less chance of saying yes, it's down to the therapy. The patient themselves might say that. Not least because they've paid a lot of money for it, and they have to justify paying all that money, don't they?
That's quite funny.
Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of other stuff, I'm Jewish. I'm a grandfather. I am indeed an editor. I've edited goodness knows how many books. I've single authored about 25 books, including 3 novels and several children's stories. I also wrote a memoir of the Malaysian emergency with my dad, who was in the Scots Guards, and
Wow.
and, and that was quite interesting. Well, it's quite a nice book. But what was interesting about it was that when I was younger, like many young people, I was basically a pacifist, and I still am. But I was, but my dad was absolutely obsessed with talking about his time in the army, and
Mm.
I just didn't want to hear any of it. When he was very ill, he was actually dying with gallbladder cancer. We spent the last year of his life sitting down talking about his time in the army, and I suddenly realized that my fantasies of what it was like to be a 19-year-old out in Malaysia in the Scots Guards, my fantasies of what that was like were completely wrong. My
You
dad
had
was not
fantasies
great.
about that? That
Well, I had
sounds.
fantasies in terms of ideas of what it was like. You
What
know,
were your
I
ideas about what it was like? What did
I
you
imagine
see?
my father. I imagine my father going around the jungle. He drove a scout car, um, shooting loads and loads of Japanese and communists and etc. But what my father told me was that in the 3 years he was there, he the only communist he ever saw was someone who had stood on a landmine and just died. He'd been there for 3 years and he'd never seen any others. And the reason for that is because the communists were so good at hiding in the jungle. So I imagined all this, face to face fighting, possibly with
Oh,
bayonets and all of this. He's
very
sitting with,
British of you, I might say. Like, we're
yeah,
coming.
exactly. But he didn't see anyone. He didn't see anyone. And he lost a few friends.
Oh,
And one of those friends uh, blew his, well, he basically shot himself, but he shot himself accidentally because one of the things that isn't well known about that campaign is some of the rifles were 15 years old. They were actually Second World War rifles, and they didn't work properly.
right.
So people would fire them, and it would explode in their face. Another guy that he liked very much flew off into the jungle one day and never came back. Went up in his plane and never returned. He'd had enough.
Well,
So
that's what I was thinking. I don't think it was an accident. He was like, I've got enough fuel to get to,
yeah,
the
yeah.
next island, and that's where I'm going. I like
So
it.
so a lot of the deaths and fatalities were either suicide or accidents.
Oh, it's
Quite.
really, yeah, that's just not how we think of war, is
No,
it?
no, but because we're somehow lured into seeing war through the eyes of film directors,
You make a very good point.
and it's like during the Second World War, the the troops were famous for deliberately firing over the heads of the other troops.
Oh,
They didn't want to kill each other unless they were literally standing in front of them. They didn't want to be responsible for killing people.
who's they?
Troops on either side.
This is it's not surprising for me to hear this because of the way I like to view the world, but
Hmm.
why I'm a little bit surprised is because I've never heard this before.
Ah,
So where would we learn about this? Why is it such a little known fact?
hmm. I guess the well, you'd have to do you'd have to do a fair amount of research, um, and a simple thing to do might be. I didn't do this. I found out a different way, but the a simple thing you might do would be simply to Google: did troops shoot over each other's heads in the Second World War? And and
Sure.
it and it's very similar if you think about it to something that's much better known, which is the first Christmas of the First World War,
Yeah.
where the Germans and the British played football with each other.
Yeah.
And the following day, the British had to be quite literally forced back to the front in order to fight. their officers threatened to shoot them.
Well, I think someone might have just stood their ground and said, shoot me then, because I'm not doing it, you know?
I think some probably did.
And they probably did get shot. So
Have you seen The Very Long Engagement?
I haven't, but I love getting new. This is a movie, The Very Long Engagement. I'm
It's a
gonna
French
find
film.
it. Ooh, even better.
It's incredibly touching, and it is indeed about the First World War and about a group of French soldiers and what happens to them in the trenches. It's fantastic.
Lovely. That's a great recommendation. Thank you. Now, and our little chat just now is perfect lead in to, I really want to dive right into your assertion that Genghis Khan and Churchill didn't need leadership courses. So expand on that for me, please, because I've been preparing for this conversation and I'm so excited.
And I think what I probably said was that they didn't go on leadership courses.
Well, I don't want to call you a fibber, but I do have your email.
All right. Okay. Well. Okay. But well, if Genghis Khan fathered something like 4,000 children,
Busy, busy guy.
and do you know why he did it?
Narcissism?
Not quite. While he was invading his way all the way from Mongolia, he
Mm.
worked out that at some point he'd have to go back again if he survived, and he wanted to be assured that he had lots and lots of relatives by the roadside.
Well, so,
Now,
and that's interesting because he grew up an orphan. And
yeah,
and so, from my point of view, I mean, I'm not sure that we got into why they didn't need leadership courses. Now what I've learned from you is that Genghis Khan he wanted to make sure he wasn't lonely and that he got a really, yay, dad's home, welcome, wherever he went. So that's great. But I want to talk more about the leadership pieces.
well, the thing about the leadership thing is that Churchill and Genghis didn't go on them. There are very, very few monarchs, I imagine, who have been on one, unless you happen to be a modern Swedish monarch. Who knows? But the thing about leadership courses is that leadership courses are, say you're a middle manager and you go on a leadership course. The
Mhm.
reason you're going on the course is to learn how to be told what to do by the person above you. It's actually a
Is that?
follower. That's so you have to learn to be told what to do in order to tell the people beneath you what to do. But it's not leadership. You're not suddenly changing the company policy. You're not deciding that instead of making microchips, a big tech company would produce ice cream. You're not doing any of that. Now, if you were at the
Mm.
top, you might suddenly do that, or you'd probably take over another company that produces ice cream. But so-called leadership seminars are not for leaders. They're for middle managers.
See, now when you wrote back and said, why don't we consider talking about this for the podcast? I thought fantastic. And as I mentioned in the preliminary piece here, I had been doing some considering about what is it that we're valuing? Who are we really worshiping these days? There's a lot of lip service to religion and religious values and being good to one another and these things. But then if we look at the actions of those who are in charge, it really doesn't align. And then you said, hey, they didn't need leadership courses. And I thought they didn't have courses the way we're doing them today. But Churchill had a beautiful leadership course within his father, right? I mean, his father was a British aristocrat and a politician. He's from a well-known family. He went to great school. He was in the military. And Khan comes from sort of the wrong side of the tracks. So he has the people on his side to rally behind him. And he built alliances through being charismatic and negotiation and again, military service. So they did have leadership courses, but not the way we have them today. So do people need leadership courses today? Because most are neither born to parents in diplomatic service nor participate in military service themselves? Is that the missing piece?
No, they don't. They don't need the courses. They are forced to go on the courses. They are told to go on them because their company wants them to be a certain way. They don't need the course. I actually made the mistake once of agreeing to do a leadership course, and it was for my National Health Service Trust. And so because I was in charge of a big psychology department, etc., they asked me to do it. And I discovered something. I asked a very simple question. There were probably 15 people there, and they were mostly men. I think there were maybe 2 women. But I asked a simple question. I asked them how many of them as children had ever led anything. Not one of them was captain of a football team, a soccer team, a netball team.
Really?
Not one of them.
And
Not
these
one
are
of them.
all psychologists, psychiatrists.
No, oh God, no. There were doctors, administrators, the chief executive of the trust, who was actually ex-military. Um, no, this was a full. I don't think there were any psychologists apart from me. They were just a sort of a across the board senior management level, but
All right.
none of them as children had ever led anything. Only 2 of them were even firstborn in their family.
Does that matter in terms of being a leader?
Well, it might. If you look at the kind of evidence of people who do become leaders, they do tend to be firstborn. I did there's a big I think it's 5 volumes it is, and it's the Encyclopedia of Critical Child Psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my pieces in there is on birth order.
Ah,
So
yeah.
you could just look that up. You could just go to that.
Just look at your book for the answer.
Well, just look at the entry in this. It's not my encyclopedia, but just look in the entry in the encyclopedia under birth order, because that was my entry, and obviously
Well,
it's researched.
you'll like this. How many famous leaders are firstborn? More than half of US presidents and Nobel Prize winners have been firstborn children.
There you go.
Notables: Winston Churchill, Hillary and Bill, both of them firstborn.
Yeah.
Richard Branson. So those are the ones listed so far. Thank you, co-pilot. Um, at our fingertips. Who needs the Encyclopedia Britannica anymore? Uh, so, I mean, is a leadership course merely a manipulation map? Is that what we're giving?
Yes, it's inviting people to step outside of their ordinary day, and people often like that. So it might be a full day seminar or something, or maybe a seminar every 3 weeks or whatever. And people enjoy that. They enjoy the time off work, and they enjoy sitting around chatting to other people that maybe they don't see that much. So all of that's very positive for them. So they feel they're getting something, but what's being done to them is they're being introduced to the rather narcissistic idea that they will be leaders in this culture, and of course they're not leaders. They're simply being taught how to pass on the directives from above. Because
Is
that's
that
all there is in industry. That's all there is. You don't have people at the bottom who, as I said, suddenly change a tech firm into an ice cream firm, but people at the top might do that and get rid of goodness knows how many staff in the process.
what's your point there?
Well, my point is that the so-called leadership seminar, you might have been taught you will have been taught to pass on whatever you're told from above. And if one of those things that you're told is we're about to become an ice cream company and we no longer need to produce microchips, so you have to tell all your staff that they're redundant, you will do it.
I'm not sure that that's the kind of content that is in leadership courses.
No, it's not the content. I'm not talking
Hmm.
about the content. I'm talking about the way it's structured. I'm talking about that you are introduced to the notion that somehow you're a leader, and it's a trick. You're not a leader. You're just another cog in the machine. But it's a very flattering idea that somehow you're a leader now. It's nonsense.
All right. I was considering the role of, well, because I'm approaching this from the perspective of values that we may hold in common widely, because I feel if we function from a place of values and we find commonality there, we may experience better working environments. Um, if we're looking at our values and they come from religion, one thing I noticed when I was doing some research here, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, Attila the Hun, Julius Caesar, even down to Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, the same thing. Outliers obviously would be Hitler and maybe Mussolini, but the other ones that I've mentioned, they recognize that religious tolerance, allowing, if you will, the people that they governed to worship the way they wanted to, was a way to keep the populace relatively peaceful and therefore controllable. And so they
Mhm.
had they had that perspective. It was a strategic move to kind of keep the peace of the conquered land. So we go in, we conquer, but then do as you were. Be nice to each other the way you want to. And I notice now that there's a growing global religious intolerance. And it doesn't seem very strategic to do that because it does create unrest. And so I'm curious from a psychological perspective, how can we explain the comparative religious intolerance today versus what we've learned about the most successful expansion leaders in history, right? Khan, Attila the Hun, and Churchill, they used religious tolerance as a tool to have a more harmonious base. So from your perspective, why is there this intolerance that's growing?
Well, do you mean harmonious or do you mean malleable?
The word that was used in the research that I was reading was harmonious, and I thought that's interesting, but yes, I think it would be more malleable people if they're allowed to feel that they have some freedom. And it makes sense. But that's not really what we're seeing if we look at the world right now.
Well, hmm, I'll answer as an historian rather than a psychologist.
All right.
Um, I think if you look at, I don't know, for example, uh, the period of, if you look at 1588, which was the Armada,
Mm,
it was the first Armada. So it's the Spanish in trying to invade England.
yes.
They failed, but on those ships. One of my books is called Tiract, and it's about the Armada. On those ships, there were 30,000 Spanish men, almost all men, who actually were sent to their deaths by Felipe II. And part of his justification was he wanted to destroy the Protestant Queen Elizabeth. So it was Catholics against Protestants. He,
Yes.
he wasn't particularly interested in land or that kind of conquest, but he framed it in terms of a religious war.
Yeah.
If you go back, I don't know, go back to about the 14th century in England. In the 14th century, all Jews were banned. They were actually forced to leave. There weren't many of them. We're only talking a few thousand, but they were all forced to leave, and they didn't fit with what the um, aristocracy regarded as the right religion, because the right religion was to praise the aristocracy, and Jews were disinclined to do that, as am I. So, but if you come forward a bit, you then have, well, you have the Holocaust, obviously.
Yeah.
The Holocaust is a good example of religion being used as an excuse for murdering God knows how many people. You have the Armenian massacre, which was something like 1918, 19, and there were 300,000 Armenians forced to march across Turkey, and something like 290,000 of them died. That was also religious. So I'm not sure what you mean by increasing religious intolerance. I think religion has proved a good excuse for destroying millions of people through over the centuries.
Absolutely. And I mean, I did throw in Hitler as a counter example and acknowledge that. And of course, there's the Crusades. And yes, religion is an impetus to war often. But what I was looking at is these expansion leaders who were bent on having as much land as possible, which is quite analogous to some of our leaders of today. They want as much as possible of anything. But these previous expansion leaders recognize that once they had conquered an area, that it was better, and to your point, yeah, more malleable to people if you just let them worship the way they liked. And that's why people of the time actually thought Genghis Khan was pretty good. They were like, he's great, we like him. So I know there are these sections in these areas where religion created a lot of strife and was the reason for it. However, from a strategic point of view, it seems like religious tolerance is a better approach.
Well, any tolerance is a better approach, I think.
Tolerance, full stop, is a better approach. Where
Yeah,
is
I
the
think so.
tolerance? What happened? Why all the are we just in the middle of the pendulum swinging back? Is that what we're watching? We just happen to be in a pendulum all the way to the right, and that's just the way it is.
Well, I don't know if it's about left and right. It's that
Terms of the day.
okay, but within certainly what's happening in America is you could regard that as very right,
Brazil.
right as in right wing, but there's an extraordinary amount of intolerance on the left as well, even to the extent where in Britain the Labour Party is now slowly but surely splitting because of they're having debates and views that really don't fit the so-called ethic of the Labour Party. So things like reduction in benefits, reduction in children's benefits, etc., etc. So I don't think the intolerance is can be simply divided politically left or right.
Sure.
But the question is there more intolerance? Uh, I don't know if there is. I think we live in a world of journalism, and journalism sells more papers or gets more attention by positing extreme positions. And it might well be that at the moment the news headlines that we're offered are mostly about intolerance. Whether that
Mm.
reflects what's really happening, I don't know. One of the things I used to be was a community psychologist, and some of the conditions in which people lived on these housing estates. I was born on a housing estate, by the way, but some of the conditions they lived in were, to my mind, absolutely intolerable. But they looked after each other. What might be reported in the paper was the very occasional time when one of the young men threw something at a policeman or a police car.
Right.
But in terms of the community, they were enormously tolerant of each other, and they were looking after each other.
What does that say to you?
It says that ordinary people are much more connected and much more prepared to be connected than journalists want us to be, because it's disconnection that sells newspapers.
Well, it's not really a newspaper. Well, okay. I watched a documentary last night, and it recently came out on Netflix, and it was about Brazil, and what's been going on there for the last 5 years. And it was incredibly interesting. And in Brazil is very mired in weaving religion and politics together. Um, and it's not shocking the way I find it a little shocking, the way it's been woven of late into the United States politics. But what's been on the rise in Brazil is the evangelical movement. So it's not just Catholicism in Brazil anymore. There's this rise of evangelical interest. And so I don't know how much you followed it, but they had a leader in power who was evangelical, and the people were very unhappy, and they recently voted that person out. Um, but they were talking about intolerance and that it was about control, and they were using evangelical values in the rhetoric in order to control the populace. And I'm just wondering, I feel like it's moving more that way than I've been aware in my lifetime. Do you think this is the same as it's always been, and we're just hearing more of it because there's more newspapers or we have more information shoving at us, and it's better to sell the words if we talk about it in these drastic ways?
Well, I was thinking about this, the notion of the combination of politics and religion, and the first thing that came to mind was Kennedy,
Ah,
who of course was in charge and president, but famously a good Irish Catholic boy. Now he wasn't that good as an Irish Catholic boy. He was probably a fairly typical Irish Catholic boy,
here you go.
but 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 that was a combination of religion and serious power. And
Yes.
I mean that was the one that came to mind. But my guess is that's always been the case. That even let me think. No, I'm just trying to think about Napoleon. Hmm.
Yes. And
Well,
what about him?
well, I realise that well, Napoleon was Catholic, of course, but equally at the time, the early 19th century, uh, virtually all of France was Catholic. So I'm not sure that would have made much difference.
And about Kennedy, that was really big stumbling block that he was Catholic. He was the first Catholic. There was never a Catholic president before him. He was the first, and I don't know, maybe perhaps the only, because everyone was, ooh, the Pope is going to be running our country because the president is Catholic. And that was a big, and that he won was pretty big news. I remember my mother telling me that story because I wasn't there. I wasn't there yet. So that's interesting that you bring him up when it was a major concern because he was Catholic and they didn't want the Pope running the country. Um, so all right, so we're not sure that there's more intolerance now than there ever has been. We think there's probably just as much intolerance, really? Or is it just
Yeah, I
that
think
we're
so.
easier to talk about it?
I think it's much easier to hear about it.
Ah,
So so for example, the cancel culture.
yes.
We live in a world where you only have to be impolite, slightly impolite, and you'll be cancelled. You'll be taken off some
Oh,
some sort of.
is that what we're saying? I don't know if that's so true. Who was
I
canceled for being mildly impolite?
I
Tell
think
help me
people
out.
are.
Like
It, it,
who?
it, are you on LinkedIn?
I am.
If you go on LinkedIn,
We're linked, but
which
that's where we met, Craig.
oh okay, well on LinkedIn it is absolutely filled with people doing self-congratulatory stuff. So blah 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 blah. So
Feeling very
look what I
blessed about my new promotion, that kind of stuff. Yes,
exactly.
yes.
And then what you get coming back is from probably complete strangers. well done, so and so. Really glad to hear this. It's this kind of tidal wave of mock positivity. And some of it might be real positivity, but you wouldn't use, if you were genuinely positive about someone, you wouldn't use an emoji, for God's sake. You'd actually say something.
Some of these are bot responses that people purchase in order to boost
Yeah,
their, yeah, so those are not actual people. Some of them,
no,
yeah.
and and it's like, but what it means is, if you want to get noticed on LinkedIn, just say something along the lines of, "You say you're really good at your job, prove it." And I do that, of course.
Yes,
And I,
that is
I,
true.
I don't get cancelled a lot, but I do get cancelled, and it's like, so be it. But there is a cancel culture of, if it's not good news, people don't want to hear it. So even something mildly offensive, like, see, I'm not saying
Prove
you're not
it.
doing research. Yeah, I'm not saying you're not doing research. I'm just saying prove your point. But uh, people can't bear that, so it's like cancel.
Maybe it was the phrasing. I don't know if it was actually that you asked a question, but LinkedIn in particular, I do find it lately it's been getting a little bit spicier, but I find that people are very buttoned up. And
Yeah,
if we wish to express dissent, then it needs to be carefully crafted in order to be received and discussed.
yeah,
So there's that. There are other venues where you could probably ask somebody to prove it, and they would come right back at you with equal flame, and devolve into some sort of match. But yeah, LinkedIn, they'll probably just run away. You're right.
yeah. And my various books, and several of them are fairly modernist in terms of science. So
Mm,
I'm not necessarily deconstructing the research. I'm just reporting the research to make the
sure.
point. And so well, this racism in psychology, for example, that has something like, I don't know, got at least 4,000 references in it, at least. Might have more. But I am taking the trouble via the medium of books
Mm.
to do my best to give evidence for what I'm saying. Something like LinkedIn, that I only ask people for evidence when they say what sound like extreme, to me, extreme things. So they claim to be running a very, very successful clinic. Well, prove it. I had to prove my stuff.
Well, when people say something blanket like it's very, very successful, I would be moved to ask their definition of success, or what metrics are we using to support the success? How are you defining that?
Yeah,
Um,
well, you'd get yourself cancelled
I'll
even
get
by saying that.
canceled. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
People are
I'm
so
afraid.
touchy, so touchy.
Yeah,
Well, speaking of data, our world in data estimates that more than 970 million people globally are living with a mental health disorder in any given year. And this is, depression, anxiety, substance use, and the leading causes of disability worldwide. So that's about 1 in 8 people, which aligns closely to the WHO's figure of over 1 billion people. And the estimated actual is probably more like 1.3 billion, because significant about stigma reporting it, people are limited care access, poor data collection, etc. So these 2 points, I found them because the WHO has a comprehensive mental health action plan from 2013 to 2030. Are you across their plan? And what do you think about it? Do you know about their plan?
you have to believe in mental disorder. I don't believe in mental disorder
That's you touched on that. I want to talk more about that. How do you not believe in mental disorder?
because mental disorder was basically invented by big pharma, pharmaceutical companies, by research giants, by universities in order to get money. And what we have is genuine distress. Obviously, people are unhappy, People can go
Yes.
crazy. People they can self-harm. They can do lots and lots of things. All of those things are quite specific behaviors. What happens with so-called mental disorder is unrelated behaviors are bracketed together, and suddenly you have a personality disorder, or you
Mhm.
have a schizophrenic disorder, or you have autistic spectrum disorder.
Mhm.
And this has been going on. Well, this has been during the 19th century. There was something like 12 completely different ways of grouping and categorizing craziness. But
Only
none
12.
of Yep, but none of the people who had designed these systems, and none of them claimed they knew what caused craziness. What they said was,
Whoa.
as far as they were concerned, it rather looked like external circumstances drove people mad. Bad diet drove people mad. Now this is the 19th century.
Yeah.
If you if you move forward a bit, you get to the invention of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. 1949 was the first one, and we're now on version 5 something. And every year until the very last one, the so-called number of so-called disorders increased. And now we started off with something like 120. Now we have 359, something like that. And all of us, thanks to this increase, absolutely all of us, is diagnosable. And that was the aim. The aim was to capture everybody in the trap. So once you're captured, you have an excuse to treat the person. You can earn money as a psychotherapist. You can earn money as a psychiatrist giving electroshock. You can earn money as a psychiatrist or a doctor giving drugs. That's the point of it. So, yes, distress exists. Mental disorder doesn't.
Them's fighting words. I'm thinking, gosh, we could just let a whole bomb of conversation go off if we said that in the right room. And this isn't the right room. I'm not going to argue with you. I think it's a really compelling um, perspective because when you go through these very distressing times, let's say you move to a foreign country, you create a few children, and then you get divorced. That would be a very distressing circumstance. And one may fall into some depression, but it's called circumstantial depression. Like you're not actually depressed, you're not clinically depressed. It's just you're bummed out because you're in a bad moment. And what I think I'm hearing you is that all the disorders are just because someone's having a bad moment.
They're because they're having bad times. But the point is that they're being encouraged to self-diagnose. And you, of course, uh, journalists love the idea of clinical depression.
Why is that?
Prof- Professionals dropped the word clinical before depression 30 years ago. It's only journalists who ever use it. It makes it sound somehow real.
Worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you
Clinical.
know what it means? Do you know what clinical means?
You should be locked up. No, I don't. I don't know. I thought
It
it.
means
I would have thought it just meant that you were diagnosed
no.
by a professional.
Clinical means by the bedside.
So it means
So
nothing.
no, it means by the bedside. But what I love is that sports commentators will sometimes say that goal was an absolutely clinical finish. What they're saying is that goal was by the bedside, and it wasn't. It was on a football pitch because I saw
What
it
do you
on
think
telly.
they actually mean, though? What do they think they're saying?
They I think they're trying to imply it's very precise,
Or quite
like a scalpel,
serious. Or
like
quite
a scalpel.
serious, right? See, like I thought clinical meant like it was very serious depression, but you've only got situational depression, so you're fine and you can muddle through this. Um, well, so you're saying yes, people are stressed, burnt out. What do we think of these terms?
Well, I think people are. people are stressed by life. People are stressed by not living up to their own expectations or other people's expectations. People are stressed by not being paid enough money, or they're not, or they haven't got jobs, or they live in terrible places. People are, of course, people are stressed. That's a natural human response to some kind of threat. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
So
And no, I believe that the people are by and large unable to maintain their allostatic load, that they don't know, they don't have the tools, and if they do have the tools, they don't
oh,
access them.
excuse me a second.
Okay.
Someone. Oh, sorry.
What'd you get? What'd you get?
I got my I got my medication.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
And
good.
it's also a bit that I'm not sure if this was said during your introduction, but the reason I take the medication is it's called a Pixaban, and it's for blood clotting. So over the last 10 years, I've had, in French they're called phlebite, but I've had 3 major blood clots, and so I was originally on warfarin, but now I'm on a Pixaban for life, and it's the only medication I take. And what I don't know, well, I take coffee and I drink alcohol, but what I don't know is what would happen if I stopped taking a Pixaban. So that was the nice man who delivers it for me.
Don't stop taking it. If you don't know what will happen and you're fine now, my advice
Yeah,
to you, stick with it.
yeah.
We were discussing before the break allostatic load and this idea of burnout. And before we continue with that, I did want to ask you a question, because we're talking about mental illness, and there's a lot of discussions out there, and people have done a lot of research on how we form attachments in the first couple of years of life. And that is so integral to whether or not we are able to manage well in the world as adults. And because most of us don't form secure attachments in the first few years of life, we don't form good attachments or friendships or relationships later on in life, and we're not able, and we're all stressed out. So is there, from your perspective, there any water in that theory?
From my perspective, the significant problem with attachment theory is that Bowlby invented it during the Second World War, and it's
Who did?
based on John Bowlby,
Ah,
and it's based on the entire theory is based on thousands and thousands of children who were evacuated from London to live in the countryside to avoid the possibility of being bombed. And those children had to go without their parents.
right.
Many of those children, imagine this, many of those children were Jewish. Many of them spoke only Yiddish. They would arrive in a village where no one had ever heard of a Jew. And the entire attachment theory is based on circumstances that are extremely unusual. So I actually don't believe in attachment theory. I
That's
do think
interesting.
people form what might be called attachments,
Yep.
but I think what happens is any of these terms, a good attachment, a bad attachment, what they really are value judgments. So someone is more attached to alcohol than they are to another person. That would be that would be regarded a bad attachment. But that's only because society says it's bad.
Mm,
They're all value judgments. They're just ways of regulating normality.
I I follow your train, and as relates to a substance abuse problem, though, I would say, first of all, there aren't good or bad attachments. That's not really how they're referred to, which of course
No,
secure, non-secure, all these there's not really a judgment placed on them, except secure is the best.
Yeah.
Right? We all know that. So, but in terms of substance abuse, I would say if you're harming yourself, then that's probably not a judgment. It would be turned more into a fact that it isn't a positive thing. So if you're creating problems with your body, and perhaps a lot of people when they're on substance abuse, they hurt other people as well. Would we not say that it is empirically like not a good choice?
Well, I don't believe in choice, but we would probably say that's not good for either the person or society, and so that is indeed a value judgment. Yeah, we'd say that, but that's you wouldn't have to bring in the idea of attachment to say that's not good
No.
for society. We don't need the idea of attachment to say that what's going on in the Ukraine at the moment is bad for the Ukraine. We don't require psychological theories to reassure ourselves that what's going on in Ukraine is bad for people.
Okay, so now this is interesting because there are leaders globally who are in positions to assist the people. And if we're all easy to say that's a bad situation, why has it been going on for years?
Well, because the people who say it's a bad situation don't count.
We
The
don't
people
count.
that count, the people that count are the arms dealers, people like Putin, Zelensky.
When you say count, who, by whom, according to whom? Who?
The ones that are in charge.
Hmm. So we're looking at those in charge. Now, are those people that are in charge, if we don't believe in mental health disorders, but we do believe in burnout and stressed out, would we agree that these people who are in charge are burnt out and not making solid critical decisions?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because dictators aren't burnt out. No one ever described Nero as burnt out.
Insane, but we don't have mental illness. So I guess, how are we classifying these people who matter but are making really poor decisions that the rest of us look at the situation and go, why are you doing that?
Well, you're grouping the rest of us as if everyone disagrees, but there are millions of people who agree with what's going on in Ukraine. Millions.
Hmm.
And you know that they might well have a background. Some of them might have a straightforward vested interest, like they're managing an arms company. Other people might just, for whatever reason, hate the Ukraine because they grew up at a time when the Ukraine was being particularly vicious towards Russia and Poland,
Hmm.
etc. So it's like, so I don't think there's this idea of a sort of a global majority of people who are all kind and very very happy to would rather none of this was happening. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think there are many people uh, who would be much better regarded as simply bystanders. So they don't either agree or disagree. They're simply bystanders, and it's just another news item for them. And in reality, they can't do anything anyway. It's a bit like global warming. We're all told about global warming. We're all told things are getting worse and worse and worse. And you know maybe they are, but then somehow or other we're told we need to do something about it. So people like us do a bit of recycling, and maybe we refill the wine bottle from a shop where you can refill the bottle or whatever. Uh, Meanwhile, people who manufacture cars, people who are manufacturing aeroplanes, etc., etc., etc. The things that would really make a difference, if you believe in global warming, the things that would really make a difference can't be done by ordinary people.
It is a big con to be all you should recycle citizen in your resident, you know, that's not not where it happens. It's,
No.
you know, large corporations with one-click buy options and lots of cardboard and packaging that comes with all of those clicks. I
Oh
think it
yeah.
might be more aligned to those people. Um, so, all right. So we don't have mental health disorders. We have situations that need to be improved in order to help people be less stressed out. Does that make sense?
If you want people to be less stressed out, yes.
Well, it seems to be the stressed out people that are yelling at each other in the road rage and the honking and the, you know, going off and killing your neighbor.
Well,
I mean,
they're the ones that the journalists talk about. They're
who
rare,
they're rare.
very rare. Do you know how many murders there are in England every year?
I don't. How many?
Something like 60.
Is that so?
Yeah,
That's England.
yeah. And of course, England has a very intolerant attitude towards guns, so that helps. But it's a rare event. It's probably it's
Mm.
my guess is it's pretty. How many murders annually do you have in Australia?
Well, I just looked up in England. There were 570 homicides recorded in England and Wales in 2024.
Okay, 570 out of a population of 80 million.
And interestingly, 414 male, 156 female. Um, Murders last year in Australia. Mm, I've reached my limit with Copilot in that chat, so we won't find out today.
Okay, but as I say, they're a bit like shark attacks. Shark attacks are pretty rare, but
Yes.
they are almost always reported. There are
Um,
something
yeah.
I've forgotten how many. Is it something like 70 people a year are killed by sharks? Meanwhile, we kill 70,000 sharks a year. That seems a bit unfair to me.
Hey, if they can't, you know, stand up for themselves, I don't know, I
Yeah,
don't
quite.
know what to say. Well,
Okay.
in Australia, we had 262 homicide incidents in Australia last year.
And, and I bet a lot of them were reported, if not all of them.
Incidents recorded 262, resulting in 277 victims of homicide and 278 identified offenders. Um, Interesting, because it does feel worse than that. And we've just done, you know, two countries where guns are not very widely dispersed. So
No.
that's why the numbers are quite low. So from my perspective, having worked in corporate for a long career, and I've left and noticed the difference in my stress levels. I started looking into this, and there's a lot of conversation and working with these people. You can tell that people are burnt out. They say they are. They're very stressed. People are short. They don't behave well with one another. They'll yell at each other. They'll say rude things. They're not managing themselves in an optimum way. And I feel it's on the rise, right? This stress factor. How do we manage that? How do we balance the allocetic load so that people aren't making bad decisions?
In in my when I was running the department of psychological therapies, one of the things we had to do, we were given targets, and the targets were the number of what were called face-to-face contacts that you had to have with an individual patient or a group every year.
Mm.
And what I did is I set the target, and it didn't change for 20 years, at 400 face-to-face contacts a year. Now, you can do that in your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves you so much extra time to have a coffee, have supervision, do some research, do some consultancy, do a lecture or whatever. And so if you happen to have a boss who can do that, you're pretty lucky. Outside of having someone in charge who can lessen the load by not demanding so much productivity, if you don't have a boss who will demand less productivity, then you're doomed basically.
What's the point? Well, when you say less productivity, what do you mean?
Well, having a target.
Well, if
I
we
don't.
have our KPIs, is that what that's what you're referring
Yeah,
to? Key
I get.
performance
Yeah,
indicators, right? We've
yeah,
got these things that we must hit.
yeah. I'll
Now,
get rid of.
get rid of them.
Yeah.
I feel if people are healthy, they kick goals. And if you're just piling on the stress, you're making people go like this, and they're not going to come up with the best ideas, and they're
Isn't
not
a
going to engage
KPI?
with.
Isn't KPI? Isn't that part of piling up the stress?
That's what I mean. I
Well, just
feel
get rid of it.
well, and then how are we motivating the people? I think might be the next question.
You might not need to motivate them.
I agree.
Being paid might be enough.
Yes. So is it though? Do we have any data that could support our theory that we don't need to incentivize people to get them motivated?
I think it's carrot and stick, isn't it? The idea of incentivizing people. It's just so. I don't know. As my dad said, we're all just cannon fodder. So people are incentivized to in your terms, burn out. Uh, if we left people alone, they might be naturally be more productive. And the other thing I would do is I'd give everyone exactly the same pay, whatever position they're in.
Ooh,
So if you're a chief executive, or if you're a cleaner, or if you're a middle manager, you're all given exactly the same amount of money.
then who will want to do the jobs?
Well, people always want to do jobs. Some people prefer to be cleaners. Some people prefer to be chief executives.
Would you, I wonder if people want to be the C level because of the money.
Well, very possibly, but if everyone, but if everyone was paid the same,
Yeah.
you'd just be left with people who wanted to be at the sea level, and then others who want to be at the other sea level, which is cleaners, and that would be fine.
But why do they want to be at the C level?
Well, because that's what they think they can do.
Are you sure it isn't because they think that's where the control and the power is?
I'm not sure of that, but I don't think that someone who is a domestic member of domestic staff working for a cleaning agency, I don't think they're looking for control and power. I think they have an idea of what they're capable of, an idea of how few qualifications they have, and that's the job they do, and they become quite good at it.
Mm,
And I don't think that's about control and power. That's just about acknowledging your limitations, I guess.
right, but I mean the CEO and the CFO is more what I was talking about with the control and the power. And people would be drawn to those positions currently in this system because of the perks. Um, those two obvious ones that I've just mentioned, the money and the power. So if in your world where everyone makes the same money,
You'd
then
be
we're
drawn
just
to the
left.
top. You'd be
Yeah.
drawn to the top for the power,
So it just
and you
makes,
wouldn't be. Yeah, and that's a really good way of filtering people out, isn't it? So there's a great expression which is "shit floats," and the people who go to the top really shouldn't be allowed to. So every time someone applies for a CEO position, you say, "Sorry, you can't do that."
and why? are we doing that?
Because we don't want those people in charge, because they want, in your terms, they want the power.
Yeah, how do we find the CEO?
Well, you may not need one, of course.
Oh, yeah. Well, I certainly don't need one who earns about 300 times the amount of the next person's salary.
Hmm.
So there's
And
that. So, moving on from this very deep philosophical discussion, I'm moving on to your publishing company, which is called Egalitarian, which is
yeah,
one of my favorite words. I love the word, and it's an interesting choice for a publishing company. And in today's world, where we can publish at the drop of a pin, and it could even be written by a computer. Um, what do you think about the title of your publishing company now? I mean, do you reflect on that? And I don't know how long you've had the word as your name, but yeah, do you have thoughts about it now?
well, 5 years ago. Um,
Okay.
and I went for egalitarian because I wanted a particular publishing policy that was fair. So within that policy is when we commission a book or if someone volunteers a book, um, we 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 pay 40% of of net. So we'll produce the book, we'll do the marketing, and we take 60% of net, and the author gets 40%. Now, compared to, I've worked for people like Routledge, I published books with Palgrave Macmillan. The most I've ever received was, I think, 11% as an author. So 40% was, so part of the egalitarian thing is just about trying to be as fair as possible.
Nice.
And what do I think about it now? I think it's unusual, but it was all
I
the actual rates were always unusual. And but I think what it does, it attracts a degree of attention. I was tempted to name it after my favourite word, which is examphotopilophus. And an
I don't know that word. Tell me
no,
what it means.
it's a type of dinosaur, and I just think it's. But the problem is, it's quite hard to pronounce, isn't it? It's like
Does it start with M?
no, it starts with an E. Exam.
Okay.
Anyway, so the, and our the challenge for a small publisher is actually the marketing. So getting these books out there and known about. I use a lot of the money that I make. I don't make that much money because I'm only an author, but I use a fair amount of the money that I make from my other books um,
Mm.
to prop up, I suppose, egalitarian. The thing that keeps egalitarian going mostly is we've got, I don't know how many books, we've got about 15 books out at the moment. But the thing that keeps us going are subscriptions to the journal,
Ah,
the Journal of Critical Psychology, Counselling and Psychotherapy, because a university subscription to that is something like, I think it's very cheap by publishing standards. It's something like £350 a year. Uh,
okay.
but that for that £350, that if you include the costs of printing and distributing the journal, we probably make £300 out of that 350.
That's
So
good.
we don't, and we've got, I don't know how many university subscriptions we have, but we have a fair number. So we have more than enough to survive, and
Excellent.
that's all we're really trying to do, I suppose. We're trying to survive and make a minor difference to people's quality of reading.
Well, the peer-reviewed studies, I mean, we need those. There's a lot being shut down at the moment in other parts of the world, so don't
Yeah.
stop. Now, I've got one other question for you before I let you get on with the rest of your afternoon, and it's my studio game. And I ask everybody this question, and it is, what is your current first world problem?
The woman I love is 1,000 miles away.
I don't know if that's a first world problem.
It's the only problem.
Oh, that's your only problem. I love it. I mean, I don't love it, but I think that's beautiful that that's your only problem. And that sounds like a beautiful life. And I hope that you're going to see her soon.
On the 20th.
You got 5 days. So soon.
I know.
4 sleeps. It's exciting. Craig, this has been fun, and I knew it would be. And I love that you've got a fresh perspective and aren't afraid to talk about it. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me.
You're welcome.
All right. I'll be in touch. Have a good day.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.